Hello, hello, and welcome to Progressive West Texas, the show where we talk to community leaders trying to make positive change in our area. I am your host, Cannon Roberts, also known as West Texas Progressive on TikTok and Instagram. Today, we have someone that you have already seen a couple of times. Today, we are talking to Bethany Luna about her campaign, and we kind of break down what she feels like she did well, what she needs to do differently next time. And I'm really impressed with Bethany's attitude because she's not letting it get to her that much that she lost. Like, losing your first campaign is nothing to be ashamed about. And so she has a very good attitude. She's really thought through, what she needs to do differently next time. And the other thing I was really impressed with, and I hope you see too in this interview, is that she's not blaming the voters. She is saying, hey, we did our best. This is what we need to do next time. We need to go find new voters. We need to explain to them why why it's important. And so it's a lot of what she talks about. She doesn't necessarily use this language. What she talks about is that we need to spend the next 2 years in Lubbock organizing. Something that I talk to a lot with my interns is about the difference between organizing and mobilizing. And mobilizing gets all the attention because mobilizing is fun, and mobilizing is building up that excitement and getting people to go out and vote, which is necessary. It's really important. However, if you want people to get that excitement, go vote, they also have to have the education to know, like, are they registered to vote? Where are they registered to vote? Who's in their district? They have to have the knowledge, of what's important, who's running, what are the policies. So organizing is a multi-step process that that takes a lot of time and effort. And so I think what you hear is Bethany breaking down those steps in organizing and looking to how she's going to spend the next 2 years organizing, so that when it's time to mobilize, she will have the audience and the community ready to mobilize and go support her. So it's a really good conversation, and let's do it. Let's go talk to Bethany Luna. Well, hi, Bethany. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me today.
No problem. So do you feel like you have recovered since the election?
Yeah, I do. It took a couple of weeks. I was pretty worn down and done. I don't even think I realized how tired until
Yeah.
after I actually had time to like sit down at my house. It was very weird.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. I've done that with campaigns and that crash at the end. And like I was the
Mhm.
type when I was in college, especially in undergrad, I tended my first 2 years of college, I would get really sick during the winter break because
Mm.
of that. Because like I would go so hard, not realize how tired I was, and then as soon as I had a moment to like sit down, it would go bad. So
Yeah.
yeah, I totally understand that. So I'm gonna ask you a big general question first, but I'll have some more specific questions. But like the big general question I have is just like, how do you feel about the campaign? What are your thoughts about it? Go
Yeah.
for it.
So, I mean, obviously, I'm very sad and disappointed that I did not win. I think, especially with everything occurring in Uvalde, it just brings to the forefront even more the importance of mental health, and the importance of having someone who can talk about those things from many different layers. Hearing the stories of everyone who sat during that experience, it's pretty devastating. And so I'm definitely disappointed that I lost. I think I had some really unique things to bring onto the board. But regarding the actual campaign, like, a lot of people say, I'm so sorry, and I don't feel sorry at all. I feel like I ran the best campaign that I knew how. I got 1,090 votes in a mostly um, it in I guess in a district that has a different demographic than me. Um,
Yeah.
um, and so I feel really proud. 30% of the vote. In rural West Texas, with the kinds of things that are said and propagated here, man, I feel really, really happy of the work that I did.
Yeah.
Um,
And
people have,
I think you should. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
that's especially, I mean, sometimes I think like our numbers, because you say 30%, and it seems like, well, if I only got 30%, I lost by a lot. But let's look at those whole numbers. And for your district, I think looking at those whole numbers is really important, because you're right. You got over 1,000 votes,
mhm,
and so if that's 30%. Then he's only looking at a couple of thousand votes, and so
mhm,
now if we're looking at it that way, of like what separated you, was 1,000 votes or so. I haven't looked at the final numbers specifically,
sure.
but like that's doable. That's
Yeah.
doable. And a district of, I don't know the total number of people, but if, there's over 100,000 people in Lubbock, or over 200,000, and we have 5 districts
Mhm,
in LISD, so you're looking at, out of 50,000 people. There
mhm,
was a total
mhm,
of a few thousand votes in there. So getting the rest of those votes, like percentage wise, that might seem like not a lot, but if you just look at those total number of votes and say, where
yeah,
could they come from, the next time, that seems a lot more
mhm,
doable. So yeah, I think you should be
yeah.
proud.
Yeah, and I started this with complete anonymity and no name recognition outside of, with therapists. And now sometimes I go to church and people are like, "Hey Bethany, hi Marie." I'm walking, in a store and someone will walk up to me and say, "I'm so sorry to hear about your campaign."
Hmm.
And so that I think also to me is a win.
Hmm.
Um, and I think, something I learned is I needed more of that.
Hmm.
I focused a lot on social media and trying to get into, just in front of everyone that I could who was engaged. And I think if I run again, which is a possibility, that my focus would be on getting in front of people who are not already engaged
Hmm.
and making sure that more people know. Because even like a friend at my daughter's school, he saw me and was like, "Your name was on the ballot. I didn't know you were running." And I was like, "Oh, I guess I didn't do a good job then." With like, um, outside of the ways that I was trying,
Right,
So,
right. Well, and at the
bless you.
same time, that is one of the frustrating things. I I think one of the reasons we get that reaction a lot is because people are so used to nobody pushing against the establishment, that they're
Mhm,
so used to, it's whoever has the most money is going to win. It's always going to be some rich white guy. Maybe they'll throw in a woman every once in a while, and so we're so stuck in this rut that like it almost feels like no matter how hard your candidate works, like one of the things that changed for me from going from uh working with Miguel to Tom was that with Miguel people would kind of have that same reaction of like, well, I haven't seen anything, I haven't heard anything.
mhm,
And because I came kind of in late, I would just be like, kind of like with you, I guess we're not doing a good enough job. But then with Tom, I would kind of push back on it and I would say, well, what do you want to see? Where are you expecting us? And they would say, like, well, I'm not seeing any commercials for you during the, evening news. And I'm like, okay, have you donated so that we have enough money to, to get those commercials? And so, I would not, I understand that if you're thinking about running for you know office again, you have to think about where are those votes going to come from, what can I do differently. I wouldn't necessarily
mhm,
blame yourself in that way, because
sure,
the other thing we get too is like people will have that complaint of like, well, I haven't seen ads, I haven't heard anything from you. But then when they do see those ads, or they do get those see those Facebook posts, or, they get their mailer, then they get mad about it, and they're like, well, quit bothering me. And it's like, okay, then what do you expect us to do? And so I do think you're right in that we have to find ways of getting in front of people and showing them why it's important, showing them why it matters. I don't know, like, I don't know that you should take that all on yourself and say, well, I guess I didn't do a good job
Sure.
because these people didn't notice. Because, like, sometimes you can grab people and shake them, and they're still like, what? I don't, so but
Yeah.
but thinking about that, what do you think? Like, what are some of your ideas that for next time? How are you going to get in front of these groups?
Sure. So I have a couple of ideas. One, I think I would do a few like targeted spaces of actually knocking on doors. Not everywhere because that would be absolutely impossible. Um, I think that I would start earlier with some free events and trying to like and right now, like my focus is on continuing to be active in the community
Mhm.
so that there's that name recognition isn't lost that I've built. Um, my business is going to start, and I don't know exactly how I'm going to do this, but we're going to host some free events. Um, I want to do some free events on trauma. I want to do some free events on, how to support your queer kid. Um, I'm thinking about talking to PFLAG and revitalizing that. I already was running a free trans group for adults. Just trying to figure out how to let more people know that I exist,
Mhm.
um, and that and that there's a reason. I mean, honestly, I would probably go to queer clubs
Mhm.
and like see if I can get on a microphone and tell people like pay attention, like there's someone to vote for. Last night I actually went to a drag show. That's why my voice is so raspy. I was yelling and screaming in support, but one of the local clubs here, because in the queer community, like clubs are the place where people connect very often, and there's just a culture around that. And anyways, Carrie Colby is a trans woman who is a performer and an entertainer. Um, and at the show that she was at, or she was supposed to do back in April, he said, "Get a man that can look like this." And so even within this our queer community and our queer culture, there is shame and misunderstanding. And I don't know if that was pointed or not, but like so when I found out about that, I wanted to go in a
Yeah.
way to support the trans community, right? And so
Yeah.
I think trying to find some ways, that whole long story to get to, um, trying to find some ways to get in front of people where they already are and already care, to
Mhm.
let them know that I care too, and they're not alone, and that I would care in the same way as a board member as I care enough to stay up until 2 a.m. to go, support
Mhm.
her. Sorry about that. I'm going to turn that off.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, that's the core of grassroots organizing. It's
Yeah.
building those relationships, it's connecting with those people. And I think what gets dismissed a lot is, even though comparatively, like, if you compare the queer community even to, like, not even to all the churches, or just to the biggest church in town.
Mhm.
Yeah, the queer community is far smaller, but they also have networks, they also have connections, they also have friends, and so it
Mhm.
does branch out more than that. And so I think one thing that I really liked that both you and Adam did was how y'all reached out to those groups that usually get ignored. Because
Mhm.
if we get those groups together, if we can get the queer community, to connect with the people in these neighborhoods with that they're schools are closing, like with Dupree, and there's going to be overlap there. Like some
Mhm.
people in the queer community are going to have kids, who are going to Dupree and don't have a school next year. And
Yeah.
so if we can get them to come together and realize that like they're kind of in it together, like they need to support one another, like that's when grassroots really starts becoming becoming a movement and
Mhm.
starting to make change. So what was something that you learned during the campaign, either about our city or about campaigning, that maybe surprised you?
Sure. Um, I mean, that list is very long. I had never done anything political or been involved in any kind of anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it did surprise me, like some of the volunteers who felt really passionate, like how consistently they were there and showed up. Like I kind of thought there would be a lot of in and out, and fluidity. And I really there was a core group of people who basically attended anything and everything that I did, no matter what, where, when. Um, and so I was surprised by the strength of that, um, and how nice it felt to have people. It also The biggest thing that surprised me is that almost all of the events that I was invited to were geared towards people who had a potential not to be very friendly to me in particular,
Mm-hmm.
or to people who think different. And so that was really interesting to me. I went Citizens for Education Reform, Walk the Line, or sorry, I always get it, Walk by Faith, on the Thin Line with Ken Adams. Like, he said a lot of super homophobic things,
Mm-hmm.
um, on air after I was there, and also during, our private conversation. And, I challenged him on those. And so, all of the spaces for me to go and get connected to people were generally spaces where I was less likely to have people listen to me past, "Hi, my name is Bethany Luna, and I have a wife."
Yeah.
And so that's really disappointing because I some people obviously, probably would still vote for me past that because they think I have something valuable to give.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that I feel like it was really hard to find and connect with the people who may actually think like I do or be supportive, of my family. It was hard to find them,
Mm-hmm.
and that was surprising.
Yeah. And so let's start with, like, why do you think that is? Why do you think it was hard to find those people?
So I think it's that, like, sense of hopelessness,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when we did put on when Every Child Every Day put on an event, like, there was maybe like 20 to 30 people there. It takes a
Mm-hmm.
lot of money and time and effort to organize that for only 20 to 30 people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and obviously what was provided was different than like KYFO, where they rented a room in a hotel and had like legitimate, oh, not KYFO, I'm sorry, the RNHA.
Mm-hmm.
They had an entire like buffet of food. It was amazing. It was so good. But like, that probably had 100 people.
Right.
Um, and so it's just, I think having the funds to organize that, and
Mm-hmm.
then the consistency, a group to consistently do it, man, it's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard.
Well, and I think that consistency is right, because you were just saying that, like, you need to meet people where they are, you need to find people, and so that Hispanic Republican group, they meet every month, and so at this
Mhm.
meeting that they show up to every month, they're 1 month it's y'all, it's your debate,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I do think that's important, and I have found If you didn't feel this way, like, please let me know. But like, I have found that like some of the groups in Lubbock that, that would be your ally. So some of the groups, like some of the queer groups, some of the um just the more, left leaning groups in town get real nervous about doing something like having a debate like that. And they're like, well, we can't get political. And it's like, no, like there's plenty of other nonprofits in town doing that. Um, and so I do get frustrated with that, like, they do need to balance that. And again, I understand that when they're presented with, like, which you know which arrogant white guy are you going to choose? Like, they spent years dealing with that. So, like, who cares about that? But when they have these opportunities, when they have people that represent them, like you do, and when they have people who are trying to run a different campaign, like Adam, they're still very hesitant about that. So, do you have any plans of, like, how do we get in proximity with these groups and get them to both? Because the other thing that I've noticed too is that they don't want to get political in general. So it's even though, like, some of their goals might need city support in some way, like they might need to go to city leaders, whether it's school board or city council,
Mhm.
um, to get what they want, like they still think they're not political. So how do we, one, convince them that, like, they need to be part of this conversation, and two, that, like, they're not going to get in trouble, if they're part of the conversation.
Sure. I think it's about like long-term community,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for me, um, it's being willing to stay a part of the conversation outside of just the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wouldn't have taken a risk on me, probably. Like, I didn't nobody knew who I was, right? Like, I know I'm amazing, but they don't know that. And so I think it's staying connected and continuing to build connections for extended periods of time before, and then maintaining that connection after. So one thing that people don't know, but I think is important for people to know, is when I was 24 years old, I started therapy
Mm-hmm.
school. And the moment that I started school, I said, I'm going to open a practice with a queer community. And to do that, I want everyone to feel safe and I don't want to have dual relationships. I am going to pull out of any queer community I'm connected to in any way so that I don't know the people that are being talked about, because it's small, right? And when you're connected, you learn a lot about a lot of people. And so, I mean, at 24 years old, I made that decision. I didn't start a practice for 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
but when I did, I was anonymous and I didn't know anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the kind of like integrity that I think that I bring.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I, and I think that that is also at play when I want to build relationships, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if I decide to run for an at-large position, or people are even asking me to run for a state rep, state House of Representatives for District 83, and I'm like, I don't know about that. Um, my wife definitely said no. So that would be a hard conversation to have, but like, it to me, it's about building those connections over the next 2 years so
Mm-hmm.
that when and if any of these groups do decide to become political,
Mm-hmm.
they feel safe about who they're supporting and why.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know, I went around, but
Yeah. No, I think that I think that safety is the key because they're so used to people, not using them for the photo op, using them for,
Right.
their own gain. And so, while I do think it can be frustrating with some of these communities, like, we're trying to help, we're out here, like, there was one neighborhood that told us, like, well, candidates never come out here, they always ignore us. And I was like, the last two campaigns I ran, we were out there, like, the first one, but at the same time, I don't necessarily blame them because they, for years, they've been left out, they've been,
Mhm.
and then they 2018, 2020, we dropped some flyers on them. Okay, well, that wasn't quite enough to make
Sure.
them feel brought in. And so I think, you're kind of talking about something similar, that even though maybe we've made strides, towards this, that that we haven't built that trust, that we haven't shown them,
Mhm.
that more is going to happen. So
Yeah, and like with those campaigns, that was 2 separate people,
mhm,
right?
yeah,
And were they there before and were they there after?
right.
Right? And so for me, if I choose to run again, now I'm gonna do this regardless because it's just who I am, right? Like
Mhm,
I'm donating money to the people that I really value that I think are doing good things. Like I don't even know how much money I've donated over the past 6 months to things that I've actually like realized that are happening I wasn't aware of, you
mhm,
know? There's so much more than I thought. And that's been also another really cool thing. But I think it's it's also not building trust that it's different people and that they're not there before and they're not there after.
right.
So one thing that I wish that I had done differently, I decided to run in December, but I didn't do anything until February
Mm,
and it was already occurring. I
mhm,
wish so much that the moment that I considered running, that I had started going and attending events at places. And so my hope is that if I do run in 2 years, excuse me, I will have built 2 years of trust with these communities because I'm gonna be a steady monthly present or every couple of months presence
mhm,
rather than just present for a campaign saying, "Hey, why don't you give me something, okay? I want you to, like, get in your car, spend your gas, waste not waste your time, but use your time,
right.
and vote for me." And it's a small ask, but it's
Mhm.
a big ask in our world today for someone that they don't know.
Right, right.
Yeah,
For someone that they don't know and someone who they're not constantly seeing ads for,
exactly.
because whether, you know, w- you're still not going to be the big money person, in 2 years. Like that's never going to be where we're at.
Yeah.
And so that's, and
Yeah, and I'm
that's
gonna get rich one day, come on now.
yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're gonna hit the therapist jackpot. I don't even know what that would be, but
Oh, man, I
uh,
wish.
so so if we don't have the means to, like, just constantly have advertisements in front of them, then it is that relationship. And so yeah, that's going to be vital.
Yeah,
So I do want to talk a little bit about the homophobia and the transphobia that came out,
sure.
during parts of this. Now, and again, like, you can correct me if I'm getting any of these details wrong. I don't think your opponent really went into that as much,
Mhm.
as Angelina's opponent. It was really Beth Bridges, that it seems like she's the one that started to double down on that. So can you talk a little bit about what those attacks were, and why do you feel like they felt it was necessary, to go there?
Yeah. And you are correct. Ryan Curry was very respectful to me during the entire campaign. We spoke in between events, and he was like, "I don't like all of this. I don't want to deal with all of this. Like, I don't. This this is not how I want to do this." Um, and I really respect him for that. He was very clear. He's like, I may not agree with some of what you say, but like, who am I to tell you what to do? And I was like, thank you. That's how this should be. Um, and so really, I got some messages, from random people in the world, comments on ads and things like that, which were really interesting and unique experiences. Um, and so the conversation that happened with Beth Bridges was actually on the thin line. Um, and initially they were talking about, and I recorded it. I chose not to release it. I wish that I hadn't said I would have done that. I was a little heated and not thinking through choices, but I didn't want to give anyone an opportunity to splice it.
Mhm.
That felt not fair and not kind. Um, but anyways, at the end, um, she basically made a comment that said, we have to ensure that we protect our schools from those ideas and anyone who facilitates them. We must keep them out of our schools. And when she said that, she was referencing, the queer community, anyone who identifies as, gay or trans. And man, I just got so mad
Mhm.
because you have queer and trans kids, or gay and trans kids in your schools every day, and they're being harmed. And I know that because they're in my office and I hear the things that are happening. And throughout this campaign, I got even more messages from people telling me, such devastating stories, of just refusal to be respectful. Um, I lost a part of your question because when I think about those things, I just like feel sad and angry and like warrior Beth. I'm
Right.
like,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. No. I think that's great. I
it
think
doesn't
I think Lubbock needs Warrior Beth. I think for too long, I think we've had people that feel the way you feel,
Mhm,
but are not willing to be public and open about it. I
mhm,
know well, and I'll use myself as an example. Like I felt this way for a while, but comparing 2022 canon to 2018 canon, like 2018 canon was still like, well, I'm gonna work for this Democrat, but I'm not gonna. And now I'm just like, I'm gonna tell everybody, and like I don't care. I know, because I have privilege. I have privilege, over even someone like yourself, because I'm a straight white dude, and so. I kind of realized in the last year, like I need to start using that more. So I do think we need those. Well, I think we need Warrior Beth in our town. But as you were talking, I had I have a question, and
Yeah,
I need to be very careful about this because you'll see when I start asking it. So
okay.
because so Beth was saying that, like, that we need to protect them from the ideas, and like clearly, being a queer kid in Texas is just so much fun. Like, people, and but like that's an absurd statement, but it seems to be how people like Beth Bridges think. Like she
Mhm.
thinks, and they talk about how it's attractive, or so is it because you hear this usually, like you hear this mindset from from people who are privileged,
Mhm,
and people who don't struggle that much,
mhm,
because they're in the mainstream of religious belief in our town. They're in the mainstream of being white or Hispanic, and part of that majority, and usually they're in the mainstream of being at least like middle class. At least
mhm.
they're very comfortable. Do you think, and I might be totally wrong on this, but do you think there's a correlation between people, these privileged people who don't experience struggle, thinking that like, oh, well, it would be an easy way to like create struggle if, someone just decides they're queer. So because they don't deal with all that much daily struggle, that's why they think it's appealing. So it doesn't actually speak to the queer experience. It speaks to their privilege and their disconnection with the rest of even their local community.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. For me, how I think about it and how I make sense of this in my head is Glennon Doyle talks about this in, a podcast. She talks about how people who have privilege and power try to stay having privilege and power by putting other people beneath them
Mm-hmm.
and finding ways to create fear around different communities.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's really just about power and control, right? As long as they're bad, like we are bad, as long as the queer community is somehow hurting us and our children, then they can keep us less than. They can keep us beneath, they can keep us below. Um, and so to me, when I think about why does this occur, man, it's a great way to scare people and make sure that the people in power maintain power,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and I have so many thoughts about that that I
Well,
won't go
I,
into.
I want you to go into it though. So let's talk about this maintaining power,
Yeah.
and why do you think in Lubbock that was an effective way of maintaining power?
I mean, I think that that's what's happening in Texas. So I minored in addiction disorders and recovery studies when I was in school, and I remember hearing about the war on propaganda or the war on marijuana and the propaganda around that. So here's the interesting thing: alcohol is much more dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
creates a lot more death in our society every single day. Alcohol is legal, marijuana is not. Here's the interesting thing: marijuana came and was really coming over from Mexico and had a lot of connection to people from Mexico. And so as long as you made marijuana vicious and terrible and it was going to destroy your kids and destroy this, it was a way to maintain a power differential because those Mexicans over there are doing that weed stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've ever seen some of the propaganda that got put out at that
Oh yeah,
time, but
Reefer Madness. Yeah.
oh my goodness, it's absolutely insane, And so it's just about creating a power differential. And so if you connect a group of people to fear,
Mm-hmm.
then people fear them,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's the same way with our criminal system. The belief is that our criminal system is there to keep us safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so the crimes that actually do the most damage to our society are white collar crimes.
Mm-hmm.
White collar crimes are predominantly committed by white men.
Yeah.
And we don't have a system that can actually address that. We have a system that addresses if you break into my car, you're going to go to jail, to make it feel like we're safe, even though we're really not safe
Mm-hmm.
because Enron wrecked our world. Now it's a bunch of rich white men,
Yeah.
right? So, anyways, I get kind of passionate about this, but when and I would say that it's not just happening in Lubbock right now, it's happening in Texas in particular, but really across the nation in different states, like Florida with the Don't Say Gay and all blah 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 over and over and over again. um I'm gonna adopt my daughter legally
Mm-hmm.
just in case my life is put in jeopardy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because like that's something that I have to think about. And when I run, whenever I came after Beth Bridges and put that live out, I had a moment before I hit the button to actually like save it so that you could continue to watch it. And I thought, will this affect my business? Will this affect my home? And is anybody going to threaten me because I do this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have to think about that in a different way than the other candidates that
Yeah.
ran in the race. Um, and I said, well, if that's what it takes to challenge dumb shit, sorry, then that's what it takes.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
hit send.
Yeah. No, and I think that was totally valid for you to do that. And and I think I think we our group spent a little too much time worrying about the feelings of the opponents. Like,
Mhm.
they again, Curry, was fairly respectful. Um, Bridges definitely was not, and we spent a lot of time worrying about her feelings and worrying about, and like, who cares? She is stepping up and claiming to be a leader, claiming to be in this position. So she is accepting the criticism as well, and she should not be able to complain about it. The other thing that I was thinking about it, as you were talking about, having to, talking about adopting your daughter and going through that. The other issue here too is if they create fear about your community, then you have to spend a lot of your time doing things that straight people don't have to think about,
Time
and
and money, right?
yeah.
Money. So I can spend my money fighting the system,
Hmm.
right? Or I can spend my money gaining power and wealth.
Hmm.
Well, guess what? For me to adopt my daughter is probably going to cost me $2,000.
Right.
I don't have $2,000 sitting around.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to work to save up every month for a
Hmm.
certain number of months so that I can adopt my daughter and have safety that if she goes into the hospital and I'm the person present, that I
Hmm.
get to be seen as a legal guardian to her. And
Right.
that is stupid.
Right. Right.
It's
Well,
just stupid.
and I think a lot of the people who are creating the laws that put you in that situation would kind of, their minds would be blown that somebody would have to save up $2,000, especially a professional like yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of people in these positions of power, like even here in Lubbock, even on the school board, even on the city council, that they would be like, "What? You don't have $5,000 just sitting around? Like, what are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And so again, I think one of our biggest problems here in the city is the privilege of our leaders, and they
Mhm.
are so disconnected from everyone else. And so I want to ask you one more question, and then we'll finish up. And I want to I always want to end on a positive note. So, what about the campaign gave you hope? What gave you hope leaving the campaign?
Yeah. I mean, I think as I mentioned earlier, that core group, and how consistent it was,
Hmm.
um, felt really supportive. I had experiences where people just gave me money just for existing, and that was like really cool and special.
Hmm.
Getting to go to, the Trans Visibility Day rally and support the people who were there who spoke. Um, Getting to talk louder than the guy who had the microphone and was saying terrible things. Because I took that mic and made sure my voice was real loud. I wanted everybody to hear me over him.
Was it the same guy that showed up to the reproductive rights?
No,
Oh,
it's a
good.
different
We have
guy.
more than one. Okay.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, there's a lot more than one. Getting to see the people kind of talking about the guy who had the sign that said like, thank your mom, she wasn't gay. I'm like, number one, I'm gay and I have a daughter. Like, you're you're wrong. that it's
Right.
impossible. Hello.
Right.
Um, but the comments underneath that, the groups that I am connected to now who, just like laughed at it, and hearing the kids' response to that felt really good too.
Yeah.
I happened to talk to someone the day who walked by, and they were talking about um, what that experience was like for them and their friends, and how silly it was. And they wish she'd just go away, and so that felt really, really good. And I think also for me, showing my kids that they don't have to be quiet. For
Yeah.
me, that's probably the most hopeful thing. I don't know if my kids will be gay or straight.
Mhm.
Like, I don't really care. I'm gonna love them well either way.
Mhm.
Um, but for them, if they are in any way other, which my baby will be because she's brown, right? And that was a choice that I made for her because I wanted her to um, represent a part of me
Mhm.
and my heritage. And so she will definitely be other in that way. But I want them to always, always know they don't have to be quiet. And being quiet is being complicit and allowing mean people to, or like people who are making mean choices to keep making mean choices.
Yeah.
And that really is the biggest hopeful thing for me.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
cool. Well, Bethany, you ran a really good campaign. You should be very
Thank you.
proud of
Yeah.
what you did. And I am looking forward to working with you more in the future and
Mhm.
helping you on your next campaign, whenever that may be. So
You're just gonna will it into existence,
I
right?
absolutely, absolutely, because you're right. You're gonna be there before. You're gonna be there after. The fact that
Mhm.
you're having this conversation with me is very telling because you're right. Most candidates disappear,
Yeah.
and so
Mm.
there was a third candidate in Angelina's race, and nobody's heard from him since. So
Right.
so that that's
Yeah.
typical.
I think it's super important not to have an ego in these things,
Yeah.
like, some people didn't vote for me, and that's okay, that's their right, and whether or not people vote for me doesn't equate my success or failure, and I think being a therapist really kind of helps me with that because my entire career has to be not on basing, like, people's like, the outcomes on
Mhm.
whether or not I'm doing my job well, you know?
Yes.
My job is about trust and safety and connection, and I view campaigns very similarly.
Yeah.
And so another
Yeah.
time, mental health for
Yeah. No, I mean that's a really good point that you bring up right as we're ending. But
yeah,
I work with my interns on that and kind of,
yeah,
really talk to them about how, yes, when you run for office, you're reliant on how people respond to you. But the
mhm,
success of your campaign is not it's not dictated by that response. It's
sure,
dictated by what you were willing to do. And I think what we saw is that you were willing to do the hard work,
mm,
but our community was just not ready to pay attention and respond. But I think in 2 years and 4 years, I think we can get them there. It's going to take a lot of hard work, but I think we can get them there.
yeah,
So I am
yeah,
left hopeful as well. So, well,
cool.
Bethany, I appreciate it. I know you got a meeting coming up, so
Yes, thank you,
I will
Ken.
talk to you soon. Thanks
Alright,
for being on.
bye-bye.
Bye. And we'll leave it there. I like to end the show on a positive note, but I do want to take a moment to highlight how common fear is in our community, and the fact that most of our leaders, whether they are political or religious in West Texas, um, utilize fear more often than not. Like their go-to way of getting voters, their go-to way of building a congregation is through fear. Is that you need to fear everybody outside our group. Come to me, I will protect you. And so I think when we have candidates like Bethany and like Adam who focus on hope and change and say, hey, we can come together and build something, rather than saying those people are going to destroy what you have. I don't know that our community always knows how to react to that. And so I'm really excited to see Bethany's organizing in these next 2 years. And I'm really excited to work with her on that, because I think that is the way to get people to actually believe that hope and change is possible, rather than kind of staying under this assumption that all we have is fear, because we don't. We have hope. And like Bethany said, what gives her hope is that community, is that group that was so dedicated to helping her create that change. And they haven't gone anywhere. They're still here. So we have time. We have really great people to work with, and I'm excited for these next 2 years in Lubbock. So I hope you enjoyed the show, and I will see you next week.